Welcome to the Sharing the Faith podcast, where every other week we explore the beauty and power of faith in Jesus Christ, the light of the world. Now here is your host, Dr. Tom Neal.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Dr. Tom Neal. Thank you so much for joining me again for another edition of Sharing the Faith, which is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee, a bi-weekly podcast where I bring on people whom I consider great human beings and people of faith that I've known over the years, and I have the privilege of allowing them to have a platform to share the wisdom that they've passed on, certainly to me and to many others. And one of those is my dear friend, Mandie DeVries, who's joining us today from the Washington, D.C. area. Good morning, Mandie. It's so good to have you.
So good to be with you, Tom.
Yeah, I love your background. We were talking before the break about the brick background there with a beautiful crucifix.
Yeah, we put it up for this show. So.
Oh, you did. Very nice. Well, let me tell you a little bit about Mandie, and then we'll jump into the meat of our show. So Mandie DeVries spent 10 years as a director of religious education, implementing from the ground up a thriving Catechesis of the Good Shepherd program from level 1 to 3, and finally graduating to the toddler level. Affectionately known as Ms. Mandie to hundreds of children for whom she has been a teacher or catechist, she and her husband, Matt, have 6 children, several of whom are catechists also. Mandie has been recognized as a level 1 and 2 formation leader by CGS USA, and has been on the formation team for dozens of trainings, including an ongoing clergy-only formation course, which will continue on to level 2 next summer in Wichita, Kansas. Mandie earned a master's in theology with a certificate in systematic theology from St. Meinrad Seminary and School of Theology in 2020. And this fall, it's amazing, she began a new adventure in Washington, D.C., moving from Iowa, Washington, D.C., with her family and husband and family, pursuing further the question of the human person and spiritual formation of children in the PhD program at the Pontifical John Paul II Institute for Studies in Marriage and Family. Very impressive and amazing. And Mandie, this is like the adventure of a lifetime for you and your husband and children who went with you.
Well, it's definitely an adventure for me, and they're just very supportive and going along for the ride. So,
well, and I want to, before we begin, Mandie, I want to get something really important out, which is your outfit you chose for your first day back to school as a student again, which our viewers are looking at right now. So any comments on your choice of outfit?
Well, I had to be professional. I've been a mom for so long, but I ended up going with a Stitch Fix, if that's really what you want to know. And that blazer is really awesome. I was really glad. But the bag, actually, that I'm holding, my husband had made for me for my birthday when we knew we were going to do this. So it was the gift that he had from a parishioner in our parish. And in it is, on the little key holder thing, engraved on the bag, it says, "Do not be afraid," in John Paul II's handwriting. Wow. And so I love that bag.
That's beautiful. Well, I don't know if Matt, he's probably gone now. I'd love for him to do a cameo at some point during this, but maybe not. My wife and I, we lived in Iowa, by the way, in Windsor Heights, Iowa, which is just outside of Des Moines, from 2008 to 2012. Where I worked up there as the director of a catechetical institute. And that was the time when I got to know Mandie and Matt. And we just developed a very fast, quick friendship of great depth beyond just catechesis and teaching. And it's been a tremendous blessing in my life all these years. And one of the things that Mandie is passionate about, as your introduction there indicated, is the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. And this is a program actually we have in our Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee in a number of parishes, so people know about that. But I'd like to ask just if you would briefly, Mandie, just share with people what the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd is before we get into the topic.
Well, there's lots of definitions for it, but kind of what I say for myself is that it's a way of approaching the Christian mystery with children and maybe with ourselves as well. I don't know if you can hear that Anderson Air Force Base is really close by.
I can, yeah. I wonder what that was.
That explains it. We have a lot of cool things in our sky around here. Well, anyway, so Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, what's unique about it is not the content. The content of the Christian faith is pretty much has been set for thousands of years, but the way in which it is given to children, and kind of in collaboration with children, in the sense of children showing us the best way and the best time for them to receive this message in a way that they receive it with great joy. And so it's level 1 is for 3 to 6 year olds. Level 2 is 6 to 9 year olds, 1st through 3rd grade. Level 3 is 4th through 6th grade. So we always talk about these levels and people are like, what? But so basically the first 12 years of life are covered, because the kind of the capital, like I said, that we graduated to toddler. Well, toddler Catechesis of the Good Shepherd started, I'm going to say 2014, 2015. And one of the first toddler formations they ever had in the country, they had in the basement of our church in Des Moines, Iowa. And so I've been able to see that. And people are like, what is toddler catechesis? But you have to understand, this is a way of living the Christian life with children. It's not so much about teaching it as much as it is about learning how to live the Christian life. You can do that from the time that you're born. So.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great framework. And I know you'll sprinkle in, obviously, details about CGS, I'll just call it here for short, CGS throughout the rest of our conversation. Because what I've asked Mandie to talk about is not so much this time about the program itself, which I'd love another time to do, but about what parents especially can learn from the program about how to form the faith of their children, even if their children aren't in CGS. So just maybe just as a beginning, just your own experience as a parent, you and Matt have raised your children, and CGS has been woven into that for a long time. So what wisdom does CGS have to offer to you and your family? And then we can think more broadly.
Well, I was lucky because when I found it, my oldest was 2. So I found it before she was even 3 years old. So she was able to start in the atrium. And I can't really imagine my parenting without Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. I loved the Lord. That was already going to be part of my life, that I was going to find ways to serve him and serve him in his church. But when I found Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, it was like, you can say it's an organizational principle of everything that I knew. And now I figured out how it everything fit together. But the maybe one of the number one things that I learned was that children love discovery. And so I wanted to make sure, from what I learned from Good Shepherd, I wanted to make sure that my children were given the opportunity to discover the face of Christ. And I didn't hand them the faith in an already completed book dropped on top of them. I handed it to them in these little, with the Gospels, basically, that I would give them little pieces, like little proclamations of the gospel, and watch them fall in love with God. I think some of the biggest things that I learned were the things that drove me the most crazy when I went through formation. Like, for example, we show the children how to walk in the atrium. And when the person was showing me, she was walking so slowly that I almost died. I was like, I can't, this is killing me. How can we possibly go? And I realized as an adult, I was accustomed to a pace. In the Diary of a Country Priest, George Bernino says that there's this caking of ash-like boredom that just settles on us, and we have to keep moving in order to keep it from settling on us. And I was in that mode where I was going to always be moving, because I didn't want to stop and discover what was really happening in my life. It was like, but for the children, they're not there yet. They haven't acquired boredom, so to speak. And for them, going very slowly and repeating things over and over again is a delight. I think it was Chesterton too. He talked about how, we get tired of the repetition. We get tired of over and over again doing the same thing. But our Father, when he looks at the Son, he's like, do it again every day. And he says, our Father is younger than we are. I don't know if you remember that quote, but I experienced that in Good Shepherd when we walked so slowly, or when we're moving something and we move it so carefully, or when we're rolling a mat and very carefully tucking the edges as we roll this mat. I had no idea that children needed such attentiveness in their formation. And my kind of, when I was growing up, it was keep up, you'll figure it out. Keep up. And the adults kind of go at their pace, and you just kind of figure it out as you go along. Well, with Good Shepherd, we learned that if I show you something slow enough and break it down enough for you, you're capable at a young age of doing more than people ever realized. Like little videos of children, because Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, I should mention, has its roots in Montessori's discoveries of the child. Maria Montessori, great educator from the last century in Italy. And you have 2-year-olds that are cleaning out fish tanks, carefully cleaning out fish tanks, things that you would never expect, or children that our toddler atriums, they always make bread, which, as a parent, that was very painful for me, that the idea of working with a child at such a slow pace. I had been hurried through my childhood, and this gave me an opportunity to learn to slow down. I still struggle. It's not like it's easy, but probably the number one thing my husband still says to me, you can't just expect them to know it. You have to give them a presentation. And that includes with how to make dinner, how to clean out the dishwasher, just not like, oh, you silly, you should already know this. At some point in our lives, we have to learn, right? And so it was especially for the very young child, learning to go at this slow pace and delighting in it. One of the stories from the atrium is there's a child who was from a wealthy.
By the way, before you go into that, could you just define an atrium? I should have asked you that at the beginning.
Yeah, sorry.
Atrium.
Thank you. I've lived it so long I forget. And the atrium.
No, it's fine.
Is the name of the room where the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd takes place. So it's a toddler atrium, a level 1 atrium, a level 2, a level 3. It comes from the word for the place that was between basically the street and the sanctuary. So this room where catechumens were prepared to enter the faith. It was a preparation place, entering into fuller communion all the time. And so these children that's their work. That's our work, is to walk with them through this time. So the atrium, and it has a real home-like character. It's going to look a lot less like a classroom than it's going to look a lot less like a classroom than a home. And a lot of people end up learning how to make their homes more of a domestic church just by looking at an atrium, because they're like, you know what, I could do this. I can set up these toys so that they're not just all in a pile, but they're actually set out with everything with a place, so that order can be a part of our lives. The story I was going to share about the mat, this child was rolling up a mat with such delight. You would think this is just, you use these work mats to do your work, and then you go put them away, right? So the mats have no benefit. But this child, very carefully rolling his mat, went to his mother and said, for Christmas, can I have a mat? This child had so many toys. He had everything. He just wanted a mat. Just the simplicity of it, right? So I guess I would say, like, for the level 1 child, if we're just talking about 3 to 6-year-olds, the thing that I learned the most from Catechesis of the Good Shepherd was the importance of order. This was something I also wasn't necessarily gifted with starting out. My husband went through training, and he said to me afterwards, he says, you're not normalized, which is that word for like just naturally being ordered. I'm like, yeah, I know. Why did I get you trained? I don't remember, but in our home, we tried to make things so, like, we would move our plates. So we wouldn't keep them in a higher cupboard. We would keep them in a lower cupboard so that the child could help unload the dishwasher We knew when the youngest child was the one that did the silverware, because I would show them how to line it up. This is a spoon that's going to match the spoons. This is a fork. It's going to match the forks. And we knew when it was the 3-year-old that had cleaned out the dishwasher, because everything was lined up perfectly. Isn't that funny? Isn't that the opposite of what you would expect? But one of the reasons is because we always hurry. Think about if you're running in a track meet and you're like, okay, it's you need to get this baton around to your 4 people as you're doing this relay race, but you've never practiced slowly the mechanism of handing it, the mechanism of receiving it. You have to do it slowly first. And then there's this capacity that opens up, and a delight in everything being in its place. And that's with time. And you might go, well, what does this have to do with the spiritual life? And my answer is everything. It's another thing I didn't know prior to this work. It has everything to do with the spiritual life. I've had several religious sisters that have come through formation, and they say to me all the time, everything that you're saying about the youngest child in the atrium is what we teach our novices when they come to the convent. That the movements you make matter, attentiveness to how you order your home, every work you do can be prayer. And that's what we see as the children are as they begin to get comfortable with this. An atrium doesn't look the same in the beginning of the year in September, October, as it's going to look in December or March. You might look at it and you'll go, this is kind of chaotic at the beginning. And then as you see the children just all working in their own areas, and then, miracle of miracles, restoring their work. They might get out a mat, go and get a practical life work, which is, again, you think, how is something so practical as spooning beans? How does this have to do with your faith? But the delight that you see with just the movement, and the delight that you see with the concentration that they have, when they put their work back and they roll their mat away, I feel like one of the greatest miracles on the planet has happened. Can you imagine if we could have every human person just restore their work when they're done? There'd be no war. It's not quite that, but I mean, there is a sense of justice to it, right? Like being aware that I have a part in this community, and if this is going to stay beautiful, I have a role. Prior to Good Shepherd, I don't think that I would have made my children. I mean, I kind of felt my dad would always say that we were like rented mules. He'd work us like rented mules. We were cleaning the house, and you kind of got the sense that the whole reason your parents had kids was so you could clean their house for them, when really it's like, maybe it wouldn't have been so messy if it hadn't have been for us. So I kind of had that sense when I was growing up that kids cleaned because parents didn't want to. That's why kids cleaned. And then when I went through Good Shepherd, I realized that this work of maintaining our home is part of the dignity of being human. And if a child can do something, we ought to let them do it. We ought to equip them to do it. Even something as simple as putting on their own jacket, like how from a toddler can learn how to put their own jacket on. It's not going to work the same way as it would for an adult, because their arms are so short and they can't reach around and do that. So you set the jacket down in front of their feet, upside down. They basically swim into it. They put their hands down and pop the coat over their heads. And now they can put their own jacket on when they want to be able to help the family get ready for church. They can line their shoes up against the wall so that on Sunday mornings, when it's time to go to church, you can avoid that near occasion of sin of, where are your shoes? Right? Like they've been taught how to do this, and they're capable of it. Right? All those things that I had no idea were so much a part of, because being fully human is part and parcel to being spiritually mature. It's something that we have to grow into that. And so we can ignore that maybe with older people, we can just form their minds. But with the younger people, we realize that it's all part and parcel. Everything's working together in their formation, their human formation, their spiritual formation, their intellectual formation. So,
and it really sounds, as you describe it, which is such a departure from, I think, contemporary ways of living in a household. I mean, just so many things you described there, just I think don't happen consistently. But it's a whole way of forming, the life of virtue in a child at a child's level. But it also forms virtues in the parents, as you described for yourself. It started changing you as you had to adapt to a child's own learning style, learning pace, and what the child can really teach the adult. It sounds like a very, very mutual exchange.
Well, one principle that Maria Montessori says is that one cannot fully be an adult unless one was fully a child. And I think there's been a lot of healing for me in being able to kind of live some of those things as a child that I wasn't able to before. Because I'm kind of just talking about practical human things, but one of the major principles of that young child that they need, the 0 to 6-year-old child, it seems like Maria Montessori referred to that child as a child with the absorbent mind. And after 6, we get to 7 years old, the age of reason, they start being more like an adult. You can talk to them. You can reason with them. If you've ever tried reasoning with a toddler, there's something very different about the way that their mind works. But for a long time, we waited to do anything in formation because we're like, well, until their mind works like an adult's mind, it's not worth, we're just going to bang our heads against the wall. But recognizing that what's going on with the child before 6 is actually the most, I don't know if you would say the most powerful time of brain formation, of what a child can take in. For example, if a child is exposed to a language prior to the age of 6, like really exposed to it, the ease of learning, and I'm trying to learn languages in my program right now at 45 years old. It's not easy. I'm like drilling and working hard, and those children, they just they're 3 years old and they can speak Greek if they want, if they've been exposed to it. They could speak Spanish, they could speak Italian, they could speak multiple languages. What is going on here? And kind of recognizing that, we realize they're taking way more in a totally different way than they will later in their lives. We shouldn't ignore this time that they're receiving all of this as a gift. And so we have to pay attention to the environment that we're putting them in, recognizing that the environment, particularly under the age of 6 and under, the environment has an incredible capacity to teach. And so we have to be really careful what we put in the environment, intentionally so, and also the things that we're not intentionally doing, being careful, we want to make sure that TV show isn't on or in their present. We want to make sure we're not saying these words in their presence. Everything they're receiving, it's like they're receiving it without a filter, right through their skin. But I keep on wanting to get to the biggest point, which is the 0 to 6-year-old child appears to be made for relationship. I mean, if you look at a child, adults are attracted to babies, you just kind of want to eat them up, they're just, and then we've even found that when we kiss their cheeks, just because we have to, it's, making their neural processes in their brain go crazy. So we are actually helping them in their brain development when we nuzzle their cheeks, those things that are kind of designed in. The child draws out of the adult this love and protection in ideal situations, love and protection. But the child is more, because of their humility, you would say, because of their smallness, because of their need, they're just looking around and their question is, who loves me? Who loves me? And Sophia Cavalletti, one of the founders of Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, in her book, The Religious Potential of the Child, she says, I believe that the child is in need of an infinite love. And no child has ever been loved as much as he or she needed. She makes some bold statements about how important it is for a child to come to know who God is prior to the age of reason. It's like the golden age of the soul. And if we don't help them to know that there is someone who loves them in this infinite way prior to that time, you don't want to say that it's like irrevocably lost, but there is kind of a sense of if you don't learn how to walk in the time that you were made to learn how to walk, you're always going to have a little bit of a limp. If you don't learn how to speak in the time that you were made to learn how to speak, no one talks to you. No one touched you. If that developmental time, you didn't get what you needed, the rest of life is going to be a lot harder. And she makes this point that once a child reaches the age of 7, once a child gets to the intellectual plane, their questions change. It's just part of our development. And so if we meet God at the time that we're 7, we're going to ask God the questions that we have when we're 7. Well, you know what everybody's really concerned about when they're 7? What's right? What's wrong? What's fair? What's just? And if you come to discover God at this moment, and those are all the questions you're asking him, no wonder he looks like a judge to you. And so she makes the point when they were trying to say, what face of God does the child most need to see, that young child? The answer was, as you can guess from the title of the program, right? The Good Shepherd. Even though these children are not in pastoral situations in the sense of like with pastures and shepherds and sheep, they recognize the love for the shepherd and the sheep. The sheep are so small, the shepherd is so big. They're identifying with the sheep in a certain way, more than even an adult would obviously do it. And the shepherd is taking care of his sheep. He loves his sheep. You ask them, I wonder, what would happen if the good shepherd couldn't find his sheep when he was looking for it? And they'll tell you he would never stop looking for it. Why? Because he loves the sheep. You say, well, I wonder, who are these sheep that the good shepherd loves so much? And they go, I don't know. And as a catechist, it's so hard. You're just like, I wonder, you just sit and wait. They know the good shepherd is Jesus, but who are these sheep? It's such a puzzle. And they ponder this and they wonder about it, but they just love the love between the shepherd and the sheep. And one day our daughter came to me. She's actually 17 and she's in the other room right now. But when she was 5, she came into my room and said, Mom, I figured out life. And I said, tell me, this is great. She goes, we're the sheep. Jesus is the good shepherd and we're the sheep. And I said, yes. And she goes, and when we sin, that's like when the sheep gets lost. That's when we sin. And I said, and what does the shepherd do? And she goes, Mom, he will never stop looking for them. And when he finds them, he rejoices. She even did the thing with her hands. And I'm like, they always told me this would happen in training. And I never believed that it would. But that discovery in the child, like they know from the Psalms that we proclaim, they know from the way that we live in the atrium, how deeply they're loved. But this good shepherd who loves the sheep, their discovery of not giving them the fully formed thing already, but laying it out for them to discover it. It takes patience on the part of the adult, patience and incredible trust that this message is powerful enough that I don't have to elucidate it for them. But it's been a delight watching my children's faith grow in a way that I don't feel like I could say I'm responsible for, right? I put them in contact with his word and with him, but then, yeah.
The whole approach to learning that you just described there, before you said it at the end, we're quick to want to give the prepackaged answer, right? Well, this is the problem, or in other words, this is the question, or this is the mystery, and I won't leave any time for you to wrestle with that, but I'll give you the answer so you can get right to it. I mean, that seems a very modern approach to education and just to the way we think. That's an amazing thing. It's almost like you're teaching the child how to be contemplative in the way that they approach life fundamentally, as opposed to trying to master everything immediately and acquire, like a consumer, acquire information as quickly as possible to amass it. That's just the paradigm shift there. I'm just feeling how profound that is.
Well, and people are going to think I planted that in you, because there's a really cool story about how the missionaries of charity chose to start using Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. They had 2 years in a row. It was in their annual meeting. And the first year, they made the decision that it would be what they use in their schools. They would use Catechesis of the Good Shepherd for the formation of the children. But the second year was more interesting. And that was that the question was, should we use this in the formation of our sisters, as in part of their formation process that they put their sisters through? And the answer was also yes. And when the head of the order was asked, this was in 2008, 2009, when the head of the order was asked why Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, the response was, because of the element of contemplation.
Wow. You're kidding.
And it takes a little bit, because if you're not looking for contemplation, if you're just looking for instruction, then you look in catechesis and you will find it. The children they know their faith well. But it's hard to see sometimes, because these sessions, well, one, they're long. It's not the usual 40-minute or 50-minute sessions. They're long. And if you try to do it in that time and you ring the bell for the end, you hear a univocal groan from the children who just wish it wasn't over yet. And I've heard that from catechists across the country that don't have enough time in their sessions. The children just relax and relish and do these big works because they have finally time. We think in our day and age that what we need to do is move from thing to thing to thing in order to keep the child's attention focused, yes. Right? Like, it's hard to keep a child attentive. And if you watch television, you're going to notice that the camera is switching. You're never going to get the same angle for more than a couple of seconds, because they want it, they have to keep moving. But Sophia said something very profound. She said, if we too often change the object of the child's attention, he will defend himself with indifference. If we too often change the object of the child's attention, he will defend himself with indifference. And if you want to talk about what we're seeing in the world right now, I think that's probably the definition of it. And so, as a parent, how is that going to change the way that you are going to make choices for activities that you're going to do for your children? You're going to give them longer periods of work time. You're going to get I'm going to give you a couple of hours to be able to focus on something rather than just 15 minutes here and there. And pay attention to the schools where you're sending your children. How short are their sessions? I've heard of schools that have shortened it down to 25 minutes. 25 minutes for the children to be in, just because they're recognizing that the attention spans are getting shorter, but they're not realizing that we're causing the shortening of attention spans by changing the object of attention. I mean, there's so much to be learned. Like, we couldn't possibly, we barely scratched the surface of what kind of anthropological discoveries this. You see why I'm here now. And I got through the end of my formation. I've been doing formation courses, but just kind of recognizing this is just the surface. This is just scratching the surface for who is the human person and how we can assist.
It is. And that's actually a great description of how I feel about this podcast, which is coming to the end shortly. We've barely begun, and you've talked about communicating the thing that you speak about to me. Like, I have this incredible curiosity in me now that I want to explore further with you. So I've said this to other guests. I hope you can do more with me on this. I would love in the future to do more exploration of this. But before we end, I want to just first share with you a story, and then ask you to share maybe one brief story that's your favorite as to how you've seen parents affected by CGS who've gone through this. So My story just briefly is when we were living in Tallahassee back in 2007, late 2007, our children were fairly young then. I don't remember the age range, but Catherine was born in 2003, so not very old. Anyway, so it was one Friday evening, and I had just gotten a DVD of a movie that had come out recently at the time called Into Great Silence. Did you ever see that, Mandie?
Mm-hmm. Oh, Into Great Silence. Yes, I have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Into Great Silence, which is about a Carthusian monastic community up in the mountains of France, as I remember. Is that right? I think it's France. I don't think it was Austria. But anyway, the movie is about 2 hours and 50 minutes long or 45 minutes long. And most of the movie is just silence because the Carthusians live a vow of silence. And so the movie is just this documentary of this camera crew that lived with them for a year. And you just don't hear anything said mostly in the whole movie. There's even a scene where they show, after one of the monks cleans dishes, they show close up water dripping off of a plate. And it lasts maybe 2 minutes of this scene, and you're waiting for the next drop. You just can't wait. You know it's going to break free and fall. It's like I'm on the edge of my seat. So anyway, I got this DVD out. It was like 7:30 at night. It was time for the kids to go to bed. And I told them, I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to watch this video. They're like, oh, we want to watch the video. I'm like, no, you bet. So they argue with me. So finally I said, okay, here's the deal. You can watch this with me, but you can't talk or walk around or fool around or, oh yeah, we promise. I thought, well, it'll last 5 minutes. They won't sit there with a movie about silence. So I put the DVD in, and I promise you, I watched the whole thing in that room alone with these children, 4 of them, and they didn't move for 2 hours and 45 minutes. They watched the whole thing. And at the end, I remember it went off and we got up and we were totally silent. No one said a word. We got up, and Catherine was little. So I don't know how she sustained it. And we went upstairs, and as we were walking upstairs to their beds, Michael, our oldest, said, I feel so peaceful. And they went to bed, and that was it. And I thought to myself at the time, man, talk about selling your children short on their capacity to enter into something like a movie that's really a movie that's contemplative. That's the whole purpose of the movie is to lead you into that. So that's one of my favorite stories about this spirit of learning from the slow, quiet pace of life from children. So maybe one little story that you could share of a parent, the impact that it had on a parent like myself.
Oh man, it's hard to say because I would have to tell so many things about the root of why this is such a cool story. So maybe I'll just tell a story about someone that went through formation with me. It was a mom who had a child who was 4 years old, and she wanted to be a good mom. She wanted to be a good Catholic mom, and she was doing a lot with this child for their faith. And one of them was that she would do like examination of conscience with her 4-year-old. Like, what have you done wrong and some of those things that we would talk about later, and just say that prayer for the young child is praise and thanksgiving. And so just kind of helping her, and you kind of got the sense that she and her child kind of butted heads. And it was just, she felt like really responsible for what this child was going to become. And the child was like, man, you could kind of tell just from her stories. Well, she finished training one day, and I told you about the walking, how we walked in the atrium. And she went home and she said to her son, I had my atrium today, my class. And he said, what did you do? And she said, I learned how to walk. And the child got up and he walked very, very slowly across the room and turned around and walked back. And he's like that? And she said, yeah, like that. And she said that after that moment, when he's like, oh, you get it, that he began to share more of what he was doing and talking about in the atrium. He was always a kid that would come home and say, what'd you do in the atrium? Nothing. What'd you do in the atrium? Nothing. And it wasn't until after she showed that slowness that he really was able to open up to her. kind of like, I can trust you. That's just one. I have thousands, but.
Well, thousands sounds like another episode. So
Maybe.
I look forward to doing this again. Thank you so much for this sharing of wisdom today, Mandie. This has been, again, doing this conversation has been an experience of what you're describing. I feel having been led with you into that world. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. I always like being with you.
Same here. Could I ask you to lead with a closing prayer?
I will lead with a prayer that one of my children wrote after being in the atrium, and it's actually a blessing. May the Good Shepherd hold you in his arms. May you never fall out or run away. Amen.
Amen. Beautiful. Thank you again. It's so good to have you. Please tell Matt next time he has to do a cameo on the show.
Okay, I will. He'll be glad to know that.
Okay, absolutely. Well, God bless your studies and your family.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Okay, and thank you everyone again for joining me for another edition of Sharing the Faith, which is a production of the Diocese of Pensacola-Tallahassee. Our producer is Derek Diamond. I'm grateful to him always for this show. Thank you for joining us, and in 2 weeks, I look forward to seeing you again. In the meantime, may God bless you abundantly.
Thank you for tuning in today to the Sharing the Faith podcast. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit ptdiocese.org/sharingthefaith. If you listen to the audio version through an app such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, or iHeartRadio, be sure to rate, review, and comment. If you watched on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe or leave a comment on the episode. Thank you for listening.